Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take source material that you choose and we really unpack it. We look for the insights, the surprising facts, maybe those aha moments that help you get truly well informed.
That's the goal.
And today we're doing a deep dive into a really tough period in King David's life. We're looking at what he went through during one of his most agonizing trials, specifically through the lens of Psalm 3 and Matthew Henry's commentary on it.
Yeah, it's quite a moment. We're looking at a time of, well, intense personal distress for David. He's actually fleeing from his own son, Absalom, running for his life.
Hard to imagine.
It is.
Yeah.
And this deep dive, it's going to show us how, even in the middle of all that adversity, just overwhelming opposition, David found a sense of peace and security under God's protection. This material, Psalm 3 and Henry's insights, they really help us understand how God's people can find solace, find comfort, even when, all human help seems to fail them.
So, if you've ever felt surrounded by trouble, maybe overwhelmed, or just wondered how you can possibly keep a calm spirit when you're feeling fear or betrayal, well, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Right.
We'll be breaking down David's prayers, his reflections, his whole view of God, actually, and how that allowed him not just to, survive, but to sing and believe right through the middle of incredible hardship. Hardship that would break most people, I think.
It's a remarkable picture of faith under extreme pressure,
Aye.
setting the stage. David's dire circumstances.
Okay, so let's start by setting the stage. Let's unpack the specific setting for Psalm 3. It has this very unique title, doesn't it? A Psalm of David when he fled from Absalom, his son.
It does. And that title isn't just, a label tacked on.
No, it feels much more significant.
It's absolutely the key, as you said earlier. It unlocks the whole meaning of the psalm. Matthew Henry really emphasizes this. He says, knowing the occasion, this occasion, is like having the key handed to you. It lets you into the psalm's real depth.
Right. It wasn't written in some peaceful study.
Not at all. This was composed, the thoughts were digested and ordered right there while David was desperately fleeing, in the thick of it.
Wow.
And that itself tells you something, doesn't it? It shows that God's Spirit can move and inspire even when things are chaotic, unsettling. Divine revelation isn't just for quiet times. It can break through right in the middle of despair.
That's a comforting thought. And Matthew Henry draws that contrast with Psalm 2, right? Psalm 2 shows the royal dignity of the Messiah, the Redeemer.
Exactly. The big picture, the king on his throne.
But Psalm 3, through David's own personal agony, shows something just as vital, maybe more relatable day to day. It shows the peace and the holy security believers can find under God's watchful eye.
Yes. It's like an illustration, a real-life example of how genuinely safe God's people are in his hands, even when everything around them, their whole world seems to be falling apart. It's God's sustaining grace in action, captured in real time.
Henry's comparison there, it's really helpful. Because Psalm 2 is grand cosmic truth, Christ's universal reign. Important, foundational. Absolutely essential. But Psalm 3 brings that right down to earth, doesn't it? To the individual believer's experience. It shows that the same God who establishes his king on Zion is also intimately involved in the agonizing personal trials of his people, like David's.
It's a vital connection. It reminds you that God's majesty isn't some distant concept. It applies directly to our messy, complicated human lives. David's personal trial, a son's rebellion.
So let's talk about the trial itself. This wasn't just, some political rival or foreign enemy. David was fleeing from his own son, Absalom.
Yeah, the betrayal there is just staggering.
It wasn't a minor family spat. Matthew Henry paints this vivid picture of Absalom weaving this cunning conspiracy. He wasn't just after the crown, he was after David's life.
The plot was laid deep, as Henry says. It was subtle. Absalom gradually stole the hearts of the people, and his supporters became this formidable group, a huge number, as the psalm itself mentions how they are increased to trouble me.
So the ground was shifting under David's feet.
Completely. It made his situation seem utterly desperate. His own son, the son David, had, frankly, indulged perhaps too much.
Yeah, the history there is complex.
Is now leading a rebellion aimed at his destruction. Matthew Henry notes that David's affairs were at their very extremity. He was on the ropes.
And the description of David's grief is so raw. Henry mentions him weeping greatly, covering his head, walking barefoot up the Mount of Olives as he fled Jerusalem.
You can just picture it, can't you? The king, driven from his palace, driven from the holy city, stripped of his dignity. A king in exile, barefoot.
It's an image of total vulnerability, total sorrow.
It is. That picture of him, humbled, weeping, barefoot. It speaks of deep humiliation, a profound brokenness. This wasn't just a strategic retreat. It was a visible sign of immense grief, a national disaster unfolding.
But even then, even in that state.
Yes, exactly. Even then, Matthew Henry points out something remarkable. David did something that, well, many would find astonishing in those circumstances.
And that's the heart of Psalm 3, really.
It is. It speaks volumes about where David's faith was anchored. It shows how a believer can find stability even when their entire world is shaking.
Grief, prayer, and inner calm.
And what he did was, he composed this psalm. Right there.
Mm?
In the midst of sorrow, extreme danger, heartbreaking, feet bare, he wept and prayed. He wept and sang. He wept and believed.
Matthew Henry calls it sowing in tears. Such a powerful phrase.
It really is. It suggests that our sorrow, our grief, doesn't have to shut down our hope or our joy in God. Henry makes the point that afflictions, even from, say, disobedient children or any source of grief, shouldn't put us out of tune for holy songs or for genuine communion with God.
That leads to a crucial insight Henry draws out. These kinds of perils, these frights, they should drive us to God, not away from Him. That's the proper response of faith.
Instead of letting the fear paralyze you or make you bitter.
Precisely. David faced immense provocation, not just from Absalom, his indulged son, but also from his subjects, people he'd blessed, people who owed him loyalty. Think of the bitterness that could have taken root.
Oh, easily.
Yet somehow, he maintained enough inner calm, enough composure for acts of devotion like composing this psalm that require real mental focus, real freedom of thought.
That's remarkable in itself.
It is, and Henry says this teaches us that no unkindness, no betrayal, even from someone we love dearly, should ever wound us so deeply that we become unfit for communion with God. That inner stillness David had, that composure, was a sign of the Spirit working powerfully within him. Like the Spirit works best on quiet waters, you know.
And David also recognized, didn't he, that this terrible situation, this rebellion from his own house, it was linked to his past sin, his sin with Uriah and Bathsheba.
Yes, Matthew Henry notes that David saw this as the fulfillment of God's word through Nathan the prophet, the evil which God threatened to raise up against him out of his own house.
So he saw God's hand in it, even in the discipline.
He did, and this led him to renew his repentance. But, and this is so important, he didn't then just give up. He didn't despair of God's help or discard his confidence in God's goodness. His deep sorrow for his sin didn't cancel out his hope or his joy in God.
That's a fine line to walk, isn't it? Acknowledging judgment, but still holding on to grace.
It absolutely is, and it highlights a core principle, especially within a Reformed understanding. God's justice is real. Sin has consequences, sometimes devastating ones. But God's grace is even more real, even more powerful.
So David could see this calamity as divinely appointed, fulfilling prophecy.
Yet that didn't lead him to fatalism. It didn't make him throw up his hands and say, well, this is it then. Instead, it seems like it actually refined his faith. He could lament his sin, accept God's righteous discipline, and still cry out with confidence for God's mercy and deliverance.
It's that paradox again. Recognizing our unworthiness, but clinging fiercely to God's faithfulness.
Exactly. And what about this idea of courage? David appears to be fleeing, maybe looking cowardly, quitting Jerusalem without a fight.
Right, not exactly the image of a brave warrior king.
But this psalm, Psalm 3, reveals he possessed a different kind of courage, a deeper kind.
What Henry calls Christian fortitude.
Precisely. It's not about physical daring or rushing into battle. It's a quiet, almost serene security of mind, an unshakable inner calm.
Found in patiently bearing the trial.
Yes, patiently bearing it and patiently, confidently, waiting for God's timing, for his intervention. Knowing that true peace comes from an inner stronghold built on faith, not just from outward displays of strength.
It's a courage rooted in trusting God's will, his timing.
Rather than just, pulling out a sword. This kind of fortitude allows you to be calm inside even when chaos is absolutely raging outside. 2. David's application to God. Complaint and confession.
So, faced with this overwhelming situation, David does something critical. He sees the danger, he sees the enemies, and he takes his complaints straight to God.
Not to his generals first, not to his advisors.
No, directly to God. Matthew Henry sees this as a primary lesson for us, doesn't he?
He really does. Henry says it teaches us exactly where we should bring our complaints. When fears and troubles start piling up, the very first step should be prayer, taking it all to God.
And David starts by lamenting the sheer number of his enemies. Lord, how are they increased that trouble me?
You can almost hear the astonishment in his voice, can't you? He's amazed at how quickly Absalom's faction grew. Henry uses that image of a snowball, just gathering momentum as it rolls.
Yeah, that captures it well.
And Henry says it highlights the slippery and deceitful nature of crowds, how fickle popular loyalty can be.
We still see that today, don't we? One minute you're the hero, the next.
Absolutely. It's a timeless human dynamic.
Right.
And Henry adds a caution there for leaders, or really anyone. Don't build your foundation too much on popular support. It can vanish in an instant.
A sobering thought.
It is. Henry says even those who mean well shouldn't be surprised if the tide turns against them, if opposition suddenly becomes formidable. David saw his own people, seemingly loyal, swayed and turned against him with alarming speed. That itself must have been incredibly painful.
But then Matthew Henry points out that the worst part for David, the most grievous complaint, wasn't just the number, but the malice of his enemies.
Yes. They weren't just trying to overthrow him physically. They were attacking his spirit, his faith. They said, of his soul, there is no help for him in God.
That's hitting below the belt, isn't it? Striking at the very core of his identity and hope.
It's a multi-pronged attack, designed to shatter his spiritual well-being. Henry breaks it down, helps us see the different layers of malice in that statement.
Okay, let's unpack those. What's the first layer?
First, it's a spiteful interpretation of his troubles. They looked at David fleeing, barefoot, humiliated, and basically said, see, God has obviously abandoned him. He must be a hypocrite, a wicked man getting what he deserves. No hope for him now.
Twisting his suffering into proof of God's rejection. That's cruel.
It is. And it's a common tactic, even today, sadly. Second, Henry points out, it was a blasphemous swipe at God's power. They weren't just saying God wouldn't help David. They were implying God couldn't. That David's situation was so bad, so desperate, that even the Almighty was powerless to intervene.
Wow. Questioning God's omnipotence itself.
Exactly, like saying, even your God can't get you out of this mess, David. That's profound blasphemy.
And the third layer, the most painful for David.
The third layer was the direct attempt to shake David's own confidence in God, to drive him to despair. Henry calls it a buffeting, a thorn in his flesh, even a sword in his bones. For a child of God, the very thought of despairing of God's help is horrifying.
So they were trying to poison his relationship with God from the inside out.
Precisely. That's the ultimate goal of the enemy, isn't it? Not just physical harm, but spiritual ruin. To sever that lifeline of trust between the believer and God. This spiritual assault, Henry notes, is often far more painful than physical suffering. It aims to isolate, breed doubt, and destroy faith.
Which is why David brings this specific accusation right to God in prayer. He lays bare the spiritual battle he's facing.
He does. And then right after that horrible accusation, there is no help for him in God, we get that word, Selah.
Yeah, that pause. Why? Right there.
Henry interprets Selah here not just as a musical note, but as a command. A solemn pause, like hitting the brakes and saying, hold on, think about that, mark that well.
So what are we supposed to mark?
In this context, coming right after that vile suggestion from his enemies, it's an instruction to utterly reject it. It's like David pausing, taking a deep breath, and then forcefully saying, no, get behind me, Satan, the Lord rebuke you, I refuse to believe that lie.
Ah, so it's a moment of defiant faith, a deliberate rejection of despair.
Exactly. It's a crucial turning point in the psalm where David actively pushes back against the spiritual attack and reaffirms his trust right in the face of that temptation to despair. David's confident profession of dependence.
It's really powerful how David responds. They say, no help for him in God, and instead of crumbling, his faith seems to, well, double down. He clings tighter to God.
That's exactly what Henry observes. The more David was beaten off from God, whether by insults or by hardship, the firmer hold he took of him. He refuses to be shaken from his confidence.
And he declares it so boldly. But thou, O Lord, art a shield for me. Not, I hope you'll be a shield, but you art a shield.
Yes, he moves straight from lamenting the attack to this confident profession of faith. And Henry unpacks that statement. Thou, O Lord, art a shield for me, my glory, and the lifter up of my head.
He sees three distinct affirmations there about who God is for his people.
Okay, let's look at those. First, a shield for me.
Right. Henry explains this signifies comprehensive protection. God secures him on all sides from the enemies surrounding him. A shield defends against attacks from any direction. So it shows both David's claiming of that divine protection, his interest in it, and also his present experience of its benefit, even amidst the danger.
He feels shielded, even while fleeing.
Yes, it's a present reality for him.
Then second, God is my glory. How does Henry understand that, especially when David is outwardly disgraced?
That's the key point Henry makes. David's true honor, his real glory, isn't tied to his crown or his royal status, which he's currently lost. His glory is in God himself.
Ah, so his worth isn't based on circumstances. Exactly. Henry says that those whom God owns, those who belong to him, they possess a true greatness, a real honor that far surpasses anything the world values. David's ambition wasn't regaining his earthly glory, but finding his worth in God's approval. When people pointed to his disgrace, David essentially said, "My glory isn't in my crown, it's in my God."
That's a radical reorientation of where we find our value.
It absolutely is. It moves from outward appearances to the inward reality of being known and loved by God.
And the third affirmation, God is the lifter up of my head. That sounds so comforting, especially thinking of him weeping with his head covered.
It is. Henry explains it means God would restore his dignity. He would lift David's head out of the dust of shame and discouragement. It means God prevents him from drooping, from being utterly crushed by his troubles.
So it's about restoring honor, but also morale.
Yes, both. Henry says God provides both the cause to rejoice, eventual deliverance, and the heart to rejoice, present spiritual strength, even in the worst times. God lifts his head literally out of trouble, or at least sustains his spirit within the trouble, so he doesn't lose heart. It's about restoring hope and even a posture of confidence.
Shield, glory, lifter of the head. That's quite a declaration of trust.
It's a complete picture of God's comprehensive care for his people. It covers protection, worth, and hope.
So this whole section, really, it encourages us, doesn't it? It helps you recognize those subtle, dangerous attacks, maybe from circumstances, maybe from others, maybe even from your own thoughts that try to separate you from God, try to drive you to despair.
Definitely. It exposes those tactics.
So more than that, it points us to find real comfort, lasting security in God's guardianship. He owns his people, he protects them, and ultimately he will vindicate them. He's the one who will always lift up their head. 3, recalling God's faithfulness, past comforts.
So, having stated his confidence in God right now, in the present crisis, David then does something else really important. He looks back. He reflects on the comfort he's received from God's faithfulness in the past.
He remembers.
Exactly. He calls to mind his history with God. He'd been through tough times before, many difficulties, and he consistently found God to be all-sufficient. And this remembering, this history of God's goodness, it fuels his current hope.
That's such a practical discipline for faith, isn't it? Deliberately recalling past grace.
It really is. It builds a foundation of trust. And David notes how his past troubles consistently led him to prayer. I cried unto God with my voice.
Not just thought prayers, but vocal prayers.
Right. Henry picks up on that with my voice. He suggests that sometimes care and grief can actually be beneficial if they push us to more earnest, fervent prayer, the kind where the heart is so full it overflows into audible words. Our distress can become a catalyst for deeper communion.
And crucially, God heard those prayers.
Always. David testifies, "He heard me out of his holy hill." Now, Henry clarifies this could mean God hearing from heaven, his dwelling place, or perhaps referring to the Ark on Mount Zion, the place where God manifested his presence and gave answers.
But David wasn't near the ark then, was he? He was fleeing.
Precisely. He was physically distant from the established place of worship, but his point is that didn't matter. He could still cry out, and God would still hear and send answers of peace.
So distant circumstances, they don't block God's grace or our access through faith.
Not at all. And Henry adds that ultimately our prayers are heard through Christ, the one mediator whom the Father always hears. All God's answers come through him, based on the covenant promises. So he connects David's experience right into the heart of the gospel.
David also found comfort, didn't he? Just in the simple fact that he can rest. He says, I laid myself down and slept, and awakened refreshed, for the Lord sustained me.
Yeah, that verse is remarkable when you consider the context. On one level, Henry says it's acknowledging God's daily mercy in providing sleep and waking, just like he provides daily bread. We often take that sustaining power for granted.
Sorry.
But on a deeper level, given David was surrounded by enemies, his life in peril, it shows incredible inner calm. How could he possibly sleep soundly?
Right. With his son hunting him, his kingdom crumbling.
Exactly. Henry says this demonstrates that David's heart was truly stayed upon God, because the Lord, through his grace and the comfort of his spirit, upheld him and kept him easy, kept him tranquil inside. It's a huge mercy, Henry notes, to have that inner peace in times of trouble, so you're not constantly agitated, trembling with fear.
He prayed, committed his cause to God, and then he could actually rest.
That's the picture. That's the kind of serenity that comes from deep trust in God's sovereignty and care. You can literally rest in his provision.
And you mentioned Matthew. Henry even connects this to Christ's resurrection.
He does. It's a fascinating application some older commentators made. They saw David's experience crying out, sleeping peacefully despite danger, and awaking sustained by the Lord as a type, a foreshadowing of Christ. Christ also cried out in agony. He slept the sleep of death, but he awoke victorious on the third day, precisely because the Lord sustained him, not allowing his Holy One to see corruption.
Wow, that adds another layer of depth seeing it point forward like that.
It does. It enriches the meaning for Christian readers, showing how these Old Testament experiences echo and anticipate the greater work of Christ.
David also looked back, remembering times God had actively intervened against his enemies. He says God had smitten them upon the cheekbone and broken the teeth of the ungodly. That's pretty strong imagery.
It is very vivid, almost visceral. Henry helps us understand it. To be smitten on the cheekbone was a sign of utter defeat and humiliation. It silenced the enemy, put them to public shame like a slap in the face that leaves a mark.
And breaking their teeth.
That signifies disarming them, taking away their power to harm. Think of a vicious animal made harmless because its teeth, its weapons are broken. Henry points to figures like Saul or the Philistines, who constantly opposed David but were ultimately unable to destroy him because God intervened. God stopped their mouths, tied their hands, broke their teeth, metaphorically speaking.
It's a powerful reminder for us then. When opposition seems overwhelming, when enemies seem fierce.
Remember God's track record. Remember how often he has intervened to break the power and restrain the malice of those who oppose his people and his purposes. His arm isn't shortened. He can still silence, shame, and disarm those who set themselves against him. Calling those past victories to mind strengthens faith for present battles. 4. Forward-looking confidence. Triumph over fear.
So David recalled the past God heard him, sustained him, disabled his enemies. And that wasn't just nostalgia. It fueled his confidence looking forward.
Exactly. He pivoted from past grace to present confidence about the dangers that still remained. He didn't just dwell on history, he applied it directly to his current, very uncertain situation.
And the result was a complete silencing of his fears. That line is amazing. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people that set themselves against me round about.
It's stunning, isn't it? 10,000 against one, surrounding him on all sides, and yet he says, I will not be afraid. Henry notes his logic. They cannot hurt me ultimately because God is my shield and therefore they shall not frighten me.
So his confidence wasn't in his own strength or even his armies.
Not at all. It was entirely rooted in God's protection. He was outwardly threatened, yes, by rebellion, maybe even feeling like a foreign invasion, but inwardly he was secure. And Henry stresses again, this isn't just bravado. It's that calm assurance, that Christian fortitude we talked about.
That serenity of mind again. Patiently bearing, patiently waiting, rather than just physical daring.
Precisely. It's a settled spirit, born out of trusting God, not an absence of danger. Henry makes that connection. Cheerful resignation to God's will leads to cheerful satisfaction and confidence in God.
So submitting to God's plan actually builds confidence.
It seems counterintuitive, maybe, but yes. By accepting God's sovereignty, even in the trial, David found the ground for unwavering confidence in God's outcome. He saw the huge army against him, acknowledged its strength, but put far greater weight on the strength of his God. That quiet confidence let him sleep soundly and face overwhelming odds without fear.
And this confidence, this belief that God is his savior, it didn't make him stop praying, did it?
Quite the opposite. It actually spurred him on. He cries out, "Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God."
Henry highlights this as a key principle. God's promises of salvation don't make prayer unnecessary.
They encourage it.
Exactly. They engage our prayers. They give us the basis and the boldness to ask. Because David knew God was his God and his Savior, he prayed with even more fervor, okay, Lord, you promised, now act. Save me.
It's participating in God's plan through prayer.
So the song starts with this complaint about the enemy's strength, but it ends completely differently.
It ends with this powerful exultation in the grace of God. David's perspective has completely shifted. He now sees far more with him God himself than against him. And Henry points out that David lands on two great foundational truths that anchor his trust.
Okay, what are those two final truths?
First, he declares, "Salvation belongeth unto the Lord." Period.
What does that mean, practically?
Henry explains it means God alone has the power and the right to save. Especially when all human help fails, salvation is God's prerogative, his exclusive domain. It's his character, his good pleasure, his promise to his people. So, if the Lord is your God, you can be certain of salvation because he is the God of salvation. It rests entirely on him, his sovereign power and grace.
There's no other source, and no other source is needed.
Precisely. And the second great truth.
His blessing is upon his people.
Yes, such a comforting conclusion. Henry says God has declared this blessing in his word, and we are called to believe it rests upon his people even when we don't see immediate, visible proof.
Even when circumstances look bleak.
Yeah. Even then, Henry makes it clear. This assures you that despite what people say, despite criticism, despite public disgrace or feeling abandoned, God's people are truly blessed by him. And because he blesses, it's a real, effective blessing that no person or circumstance can ultimately overturn. It's about resting in God's settled favor, regardless of how things might look on the surface. Outro.
Wow. That is just an incredible display of faith, isn't it? Not faith in a vacuum, not faith when things are easy, but faith right in the absolute heart of the trouble.
It really is.
David's experience in Psalm 3, especially as Matthew Henry unpacks it, it just clearly demonstrates that God's people are safe, and they can find this deep, quiet calm under his protection, no matter what their external circumstances look like.
Yeah, David's life here, it's such a powerful reminder for all of us. Even when you're facing a multitude of problems, maybe hearing those malicious whispers from others, or even your own doubts saying God has forgotten you.
No help for him in God.
Right. Clinging to God as your shield, your glory, the lifter of your head, that brings a security that just goes beyond fear. It's found in continually turning back to him in prayer, deliberately recalling his faithfulness, and just resting in his provision. That's where true peace is found.
So maybe as you, our listeners, go about your day, maybe facing your own battles, big or small, it's worth asking. When things get tough, are you letting those circumstances push you towards God, or are they driving you away?
Good question.
And maybe how could a more focused reflection on God's consistent grace, his track record in your own life, help you find that calm, even when the storms are really raging?
We definitely encourage you to spend some time with Psalm 3 yourself. Read it prayerfully, maybe even try singing it like David might have, and just observe, reflect on how God truly is your salvation and your blessing. Let it encourage you, as Henry suggests, to keep hoping and quietly waiting for the salvation of the Lord.
This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks so much for joining us for this exploration today.